From the New Arts and Media Studios in River West, the greatest neighborhood in the world, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. Oh, man. Hard to express the feelings after this Chauvin trial verdict. Of course, guilty on all 3 counts. I don't know who expected this. I did have one friend boldly predict online just before the verdict itself. I noticed he posted that. So, Mark, congratulations. I think we were all kind of in the same boat, almost expecting the worst. Like, it would nearly be impossible for them to come back with anything less than at least 1 guilty count, and we get all 3. And we were just all so prepared to be disappointed, because we've seen so many disappointments. And the reaction, I was just really struck by the several hundred people who gathered outside the courthouse. Of course, there was kind of an initial roar. I hooted myself and clapped alone in my apartment, but I was certain that I was joining thousands, millions of others. But yeah, I was really struck by that crowd. There was no, I mean, you saw it, right? You must have seen the clips by now if you weren't watching live. No dancing, no laughing, no big smiles, you know. It was really somber after that initial kind of roar. I mean, such gravity, such seriousness, people hugging, people crying, and not this jubilant, you know, I mean, contrast this with that Saturday early afternoon when all the major networks officially projected Joe Biden the winner of the election. Now, that's elation. That's dancing in the streets. That's laughing and singing and celebrating. That is a celebration. This was something very different. Some of the reporters out there and the anchors in the studios were using the word celebration, but only because they lacked the language for it. To this day, I can't think of what to call it. Certainly, this huge burden was lifted. The horrible anticipation of the worst, as I described. Relief, I guess, is the central word, relief. But celebration? No, I'm not sure what to call it. Of course, everyone was happy about the verdict. But what a wrenching, emotional moment. And as the minutes ticked away, and as we watched this great crowd of people, almost, in many cases, blank stares. Again, I can't find the words. We need to hand the show over to a poet at this point. We need somebody who can express what everyday language is incapable of expressing. I was really struck. That was my main takeaway. Because it never should have happened. We should be so far beyond this, but we're not. Many commentators stated the obvious, but it bears repeating because it's so central, that this is accountability for one man. This is accountability for Derek Chauvin. It's far from justice. If there was justice in this world, George Floyd would still be alive. It may be in part corrective if other individual police officers and if some police forces take any lesson from this, if at the very least it instills a little bit of fear, a little bit of humility. So I guess there's that, a little hope for some sort of achievement here. I guess that can't be taken too lightly. I don't know how much stock we can put in that hope that other cops or whole departments and forces will learn this lesson. I don't know if that's the case. That remains to be seen. So accountability, not justice. It's a floor, not a ceiling, I heard one commentator put it. Yeah, this is just the bare minimum of what should be expected. The fact that it was so hard fought is just incredible to think that the absolute bare minimum required, that you can't murder a man in broad daylight in front of multiple witnesses and caught on camera and get away with it. And to think, just put yourself in that frame of mind moments before you heard the verdict, especially if you were watching live, and then you had that moment. First of all, we got word that the jury had reached a verdict, and I'm not sure how much time passed. I was out on my walk, and I didn't have media with me. So when I got home from my walk, that's when I learned the jury had reached a verdict, and we should expect the announcement soon. So, of course, I tune into my preferred platform, and I see reporters chatting, and I see the shot of the judge's bench empty at this time. So now the anticipation builds. And it's all rise for the jury, all rise for the judge. They walk in, and still, as though it's some sort of awards ceremony or reality show, there are these painful several, I don't know, it felt like 10 minutes. It was probably 15 seconds, but still, the clock is just ticking in your head while he says to the jury, I understand you've reached a verdict. And then he opens an envelope, and he's got a couple preliminary legalese things to say. And finally, the verdict comes out. So I'm asking you to put yourself in that frame of mind. Were you during those moments? You had doubt, didn't you? You had a lot of doubt. I know you did. If you didn't, good for you. But I did. I had doubt. I had fear. And the very fact that we had that doubt and fear shows you where we are, or at least where we've been. That this absolute minimum, this floor of expectation, wasn't even taken for granted. And most of us feared that we'd be disappointed again. What a day. What a day. Speaking of the judge, let's go back a couple days when he sent the jury off for their deliberations. Prosecution had their closing statement, defense had their closing statement, and then the prosecution had their final rebuttal, and that was it. And something I took note of, I was pretty impressed that the judge made a real point of emphasizing to the jury, please try to set aside your unconscious bias. He used the term, or implicit bias. I'm not sure which term he used, maybe both. But he made no bones about it. He stated very clearly, we all of us humans, have implicit bias. We have unconscious bias against people who may be a different age, a different race, a different religion, a different ethnicity. We all carry implicit bias. So please be aware of that. And please try to check that. Do everything you can to reach your decision based on the facts of this case and not on your own implicit bias. He made a special point of that. I thought that was a pretty big deal because there are people in this world. Somebody I like to pick on a lot, Bill Maher, kind of the libertarian types, the more conservative types, who adamantly refuse to accept the very concept of implicit bias. There's a particular cohort of white folks in this country, conservatives, libertarians, and they get very upset at the notion of implicit bias, and they vociferously deny it. My arch enemy, Bill Maher, did it just very recently on his program. Came right out and said it. I reject the idea. There's no such thing as implicit bias. I know who I am. I know what I think. My friends know me. He was just in complete denial. So it's become one of those kind of wedge issues, the very existence of implicit bias. Do we have it or not? And this judge affirmed the existence of implicit bias, and it was the final instruction as he sent the jurors off to deliberate. I thought that was kind of a big deal. Some of the immediate commentary afterwards, you know me, I always check in with PBS NewsHour, and I'm often critical of them because they have to have a conservative. They have to have, they have to both sides everything. Well, on this one, it's really pretty difficult to both sides, this one, but they tried. They got a guy by the name of Chuck Wexler as a guest, along with somebody, I believe, from ACLU, maybe. It was somebody more obviously liberal. Well, this Chuck Wexler guy, is the executive director of the Police Executive Research Forum, PERF, an organization of law enforcement officials and others dedicated to improving the professionalism of policing. That's what it says on their website. So this guy's a cop. He's basically kind of a PR for cops, generally. Well, he couldn't very well come down on the side of Derek Chauvin, and he wasn't. But here's the take that he decided to go with. Without actually using the phrase, he kind of went with the bad apple argument. Here's the way he put it. He said, every cop in America wanted this verdict. So according to this guy, Derek Chauvin is just a bad apple. But no other cop would do this. Every other cop wanted a conviction, and they don't want this kind of policing. Just a blanket whitewashing of all police officers and all police departments. Everybody wanted this. Nobody thinks this is good. Well, really? Really, Chuck Wexler? Does that include the 3 officers who are going to now face trial for aiding and abetting? There were 3 other officers there who didn't stop him. So that was just patently ridiculous and very disappointing. And, NewsHour, PBS NewsHour, I know, I understand, I get what you're trying to do, but will you cut it out? Will you stop having to both sides everything? These false equivalencies, it's just, nobody needs to hear this. Very disappointing. Yeah, I'm not sure what the schedule is. Oh, yeah, no, here, I'm looking at my notes. August 23rd. The other 3 officers will be tried together. It's one case, I guess, against the 3 of them. Yep, the other 3 officers charged with aiding and abetting. And now that he's been found guilty on 2nd and 3rd degree murder and manslaughter, I imagine that doesn't sit too well with them and their case. They can't be very happy today. So, yeah, Chuck Wexler of the Police Executive Research Forum. F*** you, Chuck. Every officer wanted to see this. And that's what so many of the commentators were right to point out. This is one conviction of one officer. We have hundreds of officers in Minneapolis and hundreds more in neighboring St. Paul and hundreds more in Bemidji and hundreds more in St. Cloud and hundreds more across the river in Wisconsin and hundreds more. I mean, come on, man. There's thousands. There's millions of cops. And we have systemic problems, big time systemic problems. Well, I'm at a bit of a loss. Let me read some other comments. My own representative in Congress is Gwen Moore, and she wrote this. The world watched George Floyd's final moments and refused to look away. Communities around the country and the world demanded change. My heart continues to go out to the Floyd family, and I hope that the jury's decision today gives them some comfort. But the pursuit of justice and real reform to restore trust between communities and police must continue. No more black men or women must lose their lives. Our work is far from over. We must continue fighting for change outside of that courtroom to improve our communities. Yes, absolutely. So, Gwen Moore of the United States Congress, are you fighting for the George Floyd Police Reform Act? I hope you are. Are you fighting to reallocate responsibilities and funding toward other more appropriate agencies? I saw a commentator the other day. I'm sorry I can't give him credit because I don't remember who it was. You know, everybody hates the phrase defund the police. So this person was recommending that we frame it as helping the police, because that's actually what we're doing. We do. And that's fine. Yeah, I want to help the police by relieving them of many of their duties. You get the same result. You get the same defund the police philosophy, but you don't get all the pushback from the linguistics squad. What we need takes more than hearts and minds, although it's great to have hearts and minds changed. Yes, of course. But ultimately, we need laws changed. And speaking of changing hearts and minds, I don't want to discount that. No. Don't get me wrong. In fact, you have to wonder if this may have had a different outcome if not for hearts and minds. First, hearts and minds of those witnesses, those bystanders. The young girl who pulled out her phone and took the infamous video. Do you think without that cell phone video, any of this would have happened? The police could have easily just lied like they always do. They would have had each other's backs. They would have come up with a story to cover their asses. Yeah, without those bystanders, and especially without that videotape, this might have had a very different outcome, and I feel pretty safe in saying it probably would have. And then without the reaction, without the entire summer of demonstrations, of Black Lives Matter activists, an entire movement, and not just in Minneapolis, but across the country and across the world. That's how much it took. And again, I'll go back to these almost unbelievable conditions, that it took a worldwide movement. It took indisputable evidence from a first-person video account. That's the power that had to be amassed in order to reach that basic, minimal floor of accountability. It's incredible to think that that's what it took. But without that fortuitous, timely video, without the worldwide movement, if not for those factors, this murder very likely would have been just swept under the rug, would have been entered into the police blotter, filled with police lies, like dozens and hundreds and thousands and who knows how many other cases have gone. It's incredible to think about that. My friend Lisanne wrote this. Guilty. Now, on to eradicating this rotten-ass policing system. Derek Chauvin is not an outlier. Unarmed black and brown people are killed on the regular and defended by their departments, their unions, the court system, and their fellow cops. What can we envision and create that keeps all of us safe? I'm here for it. Let's put our resources, our tax dollars toward lifting up every single member of our communities and uprooting this rotten apple tree. For the moment, I'm celebrating. Yep, that's exactly right. That's well put, and that's my friend Lisanne. It is a rotten apple tree. Yes, it is. The whole damn tree, the whole damn orchard is rotten. It's a whole damn rotten system, and it needs to be uprooted. We need to just start over. And speaking of starting over, here's a very nice small step. This I just discovered from a couple days ago. Fox News, of all people. Minneapolis City Council moves toward unarmed traffic enforcers after Daunte Wright shooting. In the wake of the fatal police shooting of Daunte Wright during a traffic stop outside Minneapolis last week, city officials have approved a move toward unarmed traffic enforcers. Oh, man, no kidding. We've been yelling for this, and they're actually doing it. Minneapolis City Council voted unanimously on Friday for the development of a new traffic safety division which would be separate from the Minneapolis Police Department. Minneapolis City Council voted unanimously on Friday for the development of a new traffic safety division, which would be separate from the Minneapolis Police Department. Fox 9 Minneapolis reported, yes, exactly right. Every city, every county, every state do this. Separate departments apart from the police. Feds, write a law. Force local departments to do this. The vote comes less than a week after Wright, 20, was fatally shot by Brooklyn Center police officer Kim Potter in the Minneapolis suburb. Police have described the shooting of Wright as... Okay, we've got all that. Councilmember Philippe Cunningham outlined a staff directive regarding the proposed development. The document listed 4 goals of the new Traffic Enforcement Division: maximizing the traffic safety benefits of traffic enforcement, eliminating racial disparities in traffic enforcement, educating the public on safe driving behaviors and traffic laws, and earning the trust of communities harmed by earlier practices. We urgently need traffic safety in our community, Cunningham said Friday in a Facebook post announcing the proposal. We also need for increasing traffic safety to not come at a great cost of harm to our neighbors in the process. This issue is very complex, but it is surmountable. I disagree with them there. It's not complex. It's a very simple solution, and you've got it. Traffic safety separate from the cops and unarmed. Staff from the Office of Performance and Innovation have to report back to the Public Health and Safety Committee with a project timeline for the new division by the end of the second quarter this year, according to the document. The City Council also voted 11-1 in opposition of using tear gas and other munitions as part of the state's response to civil disorder. All right, that's a pretty good little capper there. That reminds me, of course, a huge element to the story that, at least up until now, I've been forgetting to mention. What the hell was going to happen last night if we had a different outcome from that jury? I mean, talk about dodging a bullet, no pun intended. My God. Again, that anticipation, that sort of dread of what was possible last night. The kinds of demonstrations and the usual violent response from the police with tear gas and rubber bullets and flash bombs. And man, we were all on edge. So good for you, Minneapolis City Council. Traffic enforcement, no longer the responsibility of the cops. A whole new department is going to take care of that. A whole new traffic safety division, separate from the cops. Yep. Doesn't have to be complicated. It really doesn't. My friend Tarek shared this from Black Futures Lab. Quote, "This verdict is the impact of the shift in our culture, our norms, and our values that we have been pushing forward for the better part of the last decade through this movement. It is work that we have done together, and it is proof that we can be the superheroes in our own stories. In my lifetime, I have seen the acquittal of the officers who brutally beat Rodney King on video. I have seen the acquittals of vigilantes and police officers who kill in our communities. And we have all seen the acquittal of an economy, a democracy, and a society that still does not value black lives. To be clear, this verdict is not justice. This verdict marks that it is possible in this society for there to be consequences for killing us. Justice, however, is still fleeting. Justice would be George Floyd alive and thriving. Justice can never be found in jail cells or even in guilty verdicts. Real justice comes when we change the rules of the game that create suffering for all of us." Once again, that's from Black Futures Lab. Thanks to Tarek for sharing it. Yeah, that's what I saw in the eyes, in the tears, in the hugs, in the often sort of stunned and numb faces of that large crowd outside the courthouse. Nobody was smiling, nobody was laughing, nobody was dancing. No, it was somber, it was serious. Relief, yes, but joy? You can't call it joy. A momentary relief followed almost immediately by a renewed commitment to the work yet to be done. I suspect you're going to remember where you were yesterday when you heard the news. And I hope years from now, when you do remember that moment, you'll remember it as a watershed moment, a moment that launched a series of good news stories, actual reform, real change, both a change in policing, a change in the law, changes in the system, as well as changes in our hearts and minds. More than anything, I hope that when you remember that moment, that's what it represents. As opposed to a moment we thought maybe that was it. That was the catalyst for change, only to be disappointed again. That's my fear. That's worst case scenario. I hope to God that's not how it all winds up. But either way it goes, and obviously I'm hoping for the former, either way it goes, you're going to remember yesterday. Sometimes you don't recognize history while it's happening, but sometimes you do. And the one thing I'll remember is what I've tried inadequately to express, and that is the sort of somber, serious weight that people carried. Relief, of course, even joy, yes, but just so weighted down by the gravity of the moment that nobody danced, nobody sang, nobody cheered or laughed. They just sort of milled around with each other, comforted one another with their presence. Tears, hugs, renewed commitment. We also saw live pictures of the folks in the street on the corner where George Floyd breathed his last. And again, there, no cheering, no laughing, no singing, no dancing. Just the very appropriate and heart-wrenching kind of a stillness. People bearing witness to the moment. A reverence. It was deep, man. I'll never forget it. So I just humbly suggest we take that moment and we carry it with us and we use it as a motivation, use it as fuel to move forward for all that needs to happen. Because we have such a long way to go. We've risen from the deepest injustice, but only to that floor, to that bare minimum. So sure, take some satisfaction in that. And also take some credit. Thank you to those who witnessed on that day, to those who pulled out their cell phone cameras. Thank you to those who hit the streets and stayed there over that long summer. And now having risen to that floor, to that bare minimum, so much further to go. Almost hard to fathom. But this was big. There's no getting around it. This was big. This was a moment. And it ain't over. The fight continues for Daunte Wright, Breonna Taylor, countless others, and, God forbid, how many more to come. Well, hang in there. Fight the fight. I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.